Hi there, this is Luis Silva. Today we are going to be talking about a very important subject in both world history and United States history, and that is the Enlightenment or the Age of Reason. The objectives for today are: first, we're going to define the concept of enlightenment. Secondly, we're going to be looking at some of the Enlightenment thinkers. And lastly, we're going to be looking at the impact of the Enlightenment. But let's begin by defining the concept of enlightenment. The Enlightenment was a European intellectual movement of the late 17th and 18th centuries, emphasizing number one, reason, and number two, individualism rather than tradition. This is a very important definition because it basically goes against the norm, tradition in Europe at this particular time period. Now, the roots of the Enlightenment, obviously, it grew out of the Renaissance, the Age of Exploration, Reformation, and Scientific Revolution. Enlightenment philosophers wanted to use ideas and reason of the Scientific Revolution for problem solving in both governments as well as in society. Enlightenment thinkers believed that religion, tradition, and even superstition actually limited independent thought. They emphasized the idea that knowledge was supposed to be based on observation, logic, and reason, and not necessarily on faith. If you're seeing here, there's like a pattern that Enlightenment thinkers actually, in a way, were on the other side of religion. They had different beliefs. Religion had actually controlled, dominated the area, Europe and many other areas. So everything that religion said was okay, and what they said it was not okay, society had to take it as not okay. But Enlightenment thinkers actually said, no, you know what, we need to work this differently. They actually thought that scientific and academic thought should be secular and should not be tied up to religion. Now, a very important concept that you need to know is salons. Salons were basically places where Enlightenment thinkers would meet and talk about everything, basically, about society, about government. Many of the organizers of these meetings in salons were females. So females became a big component, their ideas, their skills of the Enlightenment period. Now, why is this important? Well, many of the ideas about government, this includes the Declaration of Independence, it includes the U.S. Constitution, came directly from Enlightenment thinkers. In fact, a lot of the founding fathers, they actually were reading some of the manuals, some of the books that had been written by Enlightenment thinkers, and they used those ideas in order to put together the Declaration of Independence as well as the United States Constitution. As you may remember, in Europe at this particular time period, kings ruled. They didn't have like a president like we do today. They didn't have like a Congress like we do today. They basically, in this case, the kings ruled completely, totally over their territories with the concept of divine right of kings. This is the idea that the king was actually placed there by God, and therefore if you questioned the king, you were actually questioning God. If you said something bad about the king, you were saying something bad about God. So Enlightenment thinkers said, no, that's not the way it works. And they actually stressed the idea of individual rights. And they actually said that the government should respect and needs to respect the individual rights, just like we have today. You know, we mentioned all of the rights that we have. Well, you know, it's a concept that evolved during the Enlightenment thinking period. Now, Enlightenment thinkers also felt that government should work for the people. You know, and they said that basically people should have a say in what government does, and we have that privilege today. Basically, if you're unhappy with your representative, if you're unhappy with a decision that your congressman or senator is making, you can actually call that senator, you can call that congressman and express your opinions about whatever may be bothering you or whatever you may want that congressman to do. So now you have that right, individual right, to actually question government and ask government what to do. During this time period, with absolute rulers dominating most of Europe, it was impossible to do that. Now, Enlightenment and Religion. This is very important for you to actually examine. It seems like they were on like opposite sides, but Enlightenment thinkers actually, or many of them actually, they actually believe that God had created all things, but they believe that God no longer intervenes in history. Rather, they said that God is like a cosmic watchmaker who put all the gears and springs in place, and now is letting basically the world and humans just tick away without any concerns. And this is something that was relevant at that time for Enlightenment thinkers. Many people did not agree with them, but that's the way many of them believed. They believed that humans were capable of discovering the truth for themselves rather than, going to the Bible or going to any religious book as a guiding principle. Now, Thomas Hobbes, one of the Enlightenment thinkers, he is important because he basically said that people are naturally selfish, cruel, and greedy. And since they possess all of these bad qualities, they needed a strong government in order to make sure that people didn't kill each other. And in order to do that, obviously, you needed to have a government that would put laws in place. And, some of these laws were extremely harsh. And his main contribution here is that he questioned government. He came up with the idea that, government has to change in one way or another to, in a way, help the people. Later on, he gets questioned by other Enlightenment thinkers, but he's basically famous for starting the debate about how government can actually work for the people. John Locke, social contract and natural rights. Mr. Locke is really important because he believed that the purpose of a government was to protect people's rights. It's that simple. He said that the only job of the government is to protect life, liberty, and property against the injuries and attempts of other men. He actually came up also with the idea that if the government didn't respect people's rights, it could actually be overthrown. That was something really big at that time, and obviously it went against all of traditional norms, traditional beliefs, especially with kings. They did not see this as something worthy of even talking about. Now, in exchange for protection, Locke believed that the government basically was put there by people so that people could be actually better off. Now, John Locke lasting impact is the idea that government could be overthrown if it failed to respect people's rights, and this was something that did not go well with many kings. And this is, what happened later on, especially when it comes down to the American Revolution, the French Revolution. Basically, governments were overthrown because those governments were not respecting the people. Those governments were not respecting the rights of the people. Now, moving on, another really important Enlightenment thinker is Montesquieu. And Montesquieu is mostly known for his ideas about the separation of powers within government. And this is something that the founding fathers took seriously. And when they formed our current government, they actually used Montesquieu's idea on how to structure the government. Montesquieu actually said that each branch of government checks on other branches, and that's exactly what we have here. And he said that when powers were not separated this way, liberty may be lost. So his ideas of government, his ideas of dividing government was extremely important in the U.S. Constitution. For example, in the United States, our Constitution actually divides the government into three branches. We have the Congress, which creates laws. We have the judicial component of government, which interprets the laws, and these are the courts. And we have the executive branch, which executes the laws, and this is the president. Now, this comes straight from Montesquieu. Another important Enlightenment thinker is Voltaire. Voltaire is important because of his ideas about religious tolerance and freedom of speech. He was an Enlightenment writer, and he was basically concerned with the freedom of thought and expression. As you may know, the kings did not allow people to freely talk, did not allow people to basically express their ideas. So Voltaire said that is not right. And he actually criticized those people or those kings that did not allow people to speak their minds or say something that, at least in this case, would benefit society. His idea basically was about tolerance, and in both religion as well as speech. He actually has a quote that I find very interesting, which basically says, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to death your right to say it." Those are very powerful words. And, a lot of those ideas actually were put together in the U.S. Constitution. For example, the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution actually talks about the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, and all of those ideas actually came from this particular Enlightenment thinker. Another Enlightenment thinker that played a significant role in developing and shaping society and governments is Beccaria. Beccaria actually defended the rights of the accused, defended the rights of what people would call criminals. He was against brutal punishment. He actually said that the governments should actually punish people, but according to what they did, and not just necessarily torture them. He believed that torture should never be used. He believed that a person accused of a crime should receive a fair and speedy trial. Now, this is really important because his ideas actually became part of the Eighth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which calls for cruel and unusual punishment, and the Sixth Amendment, which provides for a speedy trial. So Beccaria's ideas are extremely relevant even in modern day society. Now let's move on to females in the Enlightenment. As you know, females played a significant role in shaping ideas also. They were the ones who organized many of the meetings at salons in which Enlightenment thinkers went and talked about everything, basically about society, about government. But in this case, I do want to actually mention, I think this is worth mentioning, it's the old view on women. And, it's pretty sad, but it's a view that many places actually, or many areas around the world held at that particular time period. And basically, we have a quote from Aristotle here, which is pretty sad. It's demeaning, depressing, and basically his ideas about women were not the best. So let me read this quote to you, which goes, "Inadequate and infertile males who plays only a passive role in reproduction and is incapable of rational thought. This is how Aristotle viewed female, and this is, I'm sure, how many societies around that time view female, which is extremely sad. As you know, it's something that we see today, as very bad. And right here we have a whole bunch of females that actually changed and brought many important topics to the table during the Enlightenment period. One of those females that we're going to be looking at is Mary Wollstonecraft. She is a very important person because she actually fought for education for females. She fought for opportunities for females. She fought for the rights of females, and she laid out the foundation for future females to fight inequality, to fight for opportunities, to fight for education, and as you know, even to fight for the right to vote. So Mary Wollstonecraft was a pioneer in putting together those ideas during the Enlightenment that basically captured the imagination of other females, and basically brought change to many females around the world. By the way, a lot of work still needs to be done in that area, but it's something to think about. Now, the impact of the Enlightenment on government. Well, Enlightenment basically thinkers, they went ahead and fought for what they believed, and because they fought and continue to persist on what was right for humanity, many of the kings actually, or the absolute monarchs, ended the use of torture, ended, the abuse for people speaking out. They started universities. They used or implemented up to a certain degree some type of tolerance, in particular with religion. They wanted to keep people happy without losing their power. So many of these kings actually, or absolute rulers, they changed the ways of treating people in order to, stay in power. Because obviously, if they did not change, they were going to be overthrown eventually. And right here, I'm not going to mention them, but you have a list of some of the monarchs or kings, rulers that became Enlightenment. Basically, they transformed their way of thinking, and in a way, obviously, it was to their own benefit to stay in power. Now, the American and the French Revolution. These are two of the examples that resulted basically from Enlightenment thinking and Enlightenment thought. And both in America and France, basically the kings were overthrown. In America, you had the English king being overthrown, and obviously in France, you had the king from there being overthrown. Now, when the Americans rebelled in 1775, they pointed out to the abuses of their rights by the English king. The Declaration of Independence echoed John Locke's ideas of natural rights and the purpose of government. The U.S. Constitution actually took the ideas of Montesquieu and the separations of power. It took ideas of basically protecting the rights and freedoms of religion, the right to speak by Voltaire. It also included some of the rights supported by Beccaria, such as right to a speedy trial. So a lot of the components of the U.S. Constitution are a direct result of Enlightenment thinkers. Now, in France, really important, in 1789, revolution broke out in France, and the National Assembly adopted the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. This document talked about liberty and equality, and it's something that we need to think about, how those two ideas, in this case liberty and equality, is what common people wanted, is what regular people wanted in France, and it's ideas that came directly from Enlightenment thinkers. So how or what is the legacy of the Enlightenment? Well, this actually can be seen in three different parts. In governments, we no longer have governments that, at least here in the United States and in many countries around the world, even in Europe, many places in Europe, the government respects the rights of people. The government basically provide and protect the people. That's why we have militaries, to protect the people. Society was transformed. The way we think about government, we know that we are the ones who actually put people in power, and as a society we can actually remove those people from power. And education, which was emphasized by females during the Enlightenment, has become a norm in many parts of the world. In the United States, in Europe, many Latin American countries, education is a key component of society. And all of this goes back to the Enlightenment period. Well, this is the end of this presentation. If you need more help, if you need more guidance, please comment below. Or if you want to continue learning about the different topics of world history, U.S. history, government, econ, make sure to subscribe. You have a good one.